Okay everyone, welcome to this video on solving equations involving algebraic fractions. In today's video, we're going to take a look at equations that involve algebraic fractions. So from our last video, we would have learned about simplifying algebraic fractions. So now we're going to see how they function in equations. We're going to learn to solve an equation involving algebraic fractions, so you're definitely wanting to go over that last video that we would have done on algebraic fractions. If you're okay with that and you want to just remember all the little areas that you need to be familiar with before we jump straight into this problem, take a look at simplifying algebraic expressions in general. Make sure that you know how to simplify them all, especially those involving brackets and involving distributive law. Operations and fractions are a must because we're dealing with algebraic fractions, and definitely operations and integers because this is what happens when we start to work with algebra. If you're good with all of these areas, let's just jump straight into today's problem. And our problem looks something like this. We want to solve for x in this equation involving these two algebraic fractions. Alright, so we have 2x minus 3 on 3 plus 5 minus x on 2, and this is all equal to 3. We know we're dealing with an algebraic fraction type problem simply because we have some algebraic expressions with a rational form. So before we get into doing anything with the algebraic expressions, let's talk about these fractions. Do these denominators look the same to you? If the denominators are different, we should know from working with fractions and performing addition on fractions. Once the denominators are different, we need to bring them to a common denominator. So we're going to use the common denominator as the LCM of these two numbers, and in this case, the LCM of 3 and 2 is 6. So let's get started with expressing our fractions as equivalent fractions out of a denominator of 6. We're going to say how many times our denominator of 3 can go into 6, which will give us 2, and we're going to multiply our numerator by 2. So this is where that distributive law comes in, because our expression for our equivalent fractions numerator would be 2 times 2x minus 3. Let's move on to the other fraction. We're going to ask ourselves, well, how many times can 2 go into 6? And we'll get a factor of 3, and we're going to multiply our numerator by 3. This gives us a statement resembling what we had in the first one. 3 times 5 minus x. Now remember, this is an equation, so all of this is going to still be equal to 3. So I'm going to write that in because I'm dealing with an equation. So I'm going to simplify my numerator as best as I can by expanding the brackets and adding any like terms as the case may be. So expanding my brackets using distributive law, I'll get 2 times 2x, which will give me 4x, and 2 times minus 3 is 6, plus 3 times 5 is 15, and positive 3 by negative x is going to give me negative 3x. Okay, so we have our numerator more or less expanded. We now need to simplify this before we proceed to solve the equation. I'm going to look at the terms in the expression my numerator, and I notice I have 2 terms in x and I also have 2 constants. So I'm going to put my 2 terms in x together. 4x minus 3x is going to give me just 1x. So in my next line, I'm going to continue. I'm going to write x, and then I'm going to deal with my constants, and my constants are minus 6 and 15. So minus 6 plus 15, another way we could say this is 15 take away 6. And 15 take away 6 is going to leave me with positive 9. So I'm going to write x plus 9 over 6. Now remember, this is equal to 3 because we have an equation on our hands and we want to solve for x. So now that we have our algebraic fraction statement more or less simplified, we can proceed to solve the equation. In solving this equation, we're going to multiply both sides of my equation by 6 because I want to get rid of the denominator here. So let's multiply both sides of this equation by 6, and what that's going to give us is that on our left hand side, when we multiply by 6, it will cancel off the denominator on this side. So it's just going to leave us with the expression in numerator. So we're going to remain with x plus 9. Now across on my right hand side, 3 times 6 is 18. And to solve for x, all we need to do now is subtract 9 from both sides. In subtracting 9 from both sides, on the left hand side we're going to remain with x, and on the left hand side we remain with x, and on the right hand side 18 minus 9 is leaving me with 9. So my answer here is x is equal to positive 9, and that's the answer to this problem. So solving equations involving algebraic fractions is pretty simple once you understand how to simplify any statement involving algebraic fractions. So remember, if you're having trouble here, definitely go over the last video on how to simplify algebraic fractions, and definitely do a little review on working with fractions, integers, and in general simplifying algebraic expressions to boost your confidence in your abilities to work on questions such as these. That's it for our little session on algebraic fractions. So if there are any other questions with algebraic fractions when you are doing your studies, this one should have you somewhat covered.